This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so grateful that you're here. Okay, so full disclosure, you're in for a real treat today. Allison and I are friends in real life, so she knows all the good and the bad, and she has patiently sat at my feet and listened to me share hard parts of my heart. And I'm always grateful when I get a chance to visit with her. So as we continue on the month of October, particularly as we focus on Down Syndrome Awareness Month, I knew that Allison was one of the people that I wanted to visit with. She has an amazing life story with their son, Manny, who they adopted, who has Down syndrome. And I just think that her story is fantastic. She's also kind of super famous on TikTok. She's got like over 1 million followers over there. So we're going to talk a little bit about how they normalize family life and what that really looks like in a family that is imperfectly perfect. And so if you have a child who has special needs, if you tend to share bits and pieces of your life on social media, then I think that today's episode is just for you. So I'm so honored that my guest today is Allison Sullivan. She's married to Seth and she's a mom of 5. She believes in playing her part in the renewal and transformation of communities through walking humbly, acting justly, and loving mercy. She is a writer and a podcaster. She loves good hospitality and meaningful service, and she's active in social justice causes to cultivate love and hope. Allison is a trauma-informed yoga instructor, and for fun, she enjoys creating wholesome content through a family lens for over 1.2 million TikTok fans, long road trips with her family, girls' night outs with her friends, thrifting, reading, and spending time on the beach. And to relax, Allison watches Modern Family on the couch with her dogs, which are adorable, by the way. So with that, let's chat. I am excited to have you here, Allison. Thanks for being here.
Catherine, I am so glad to be here.
I wish that we were in person.
One of my very favorite people. I know, me too. I know. I wish that there was like either coffee or maybe a margarita, I don't know, between us, and we could have this conversation for sure, face to face.
It would be such a good conversation, but we'll make this one good. I wanted to have you on here because for a lot of reasons, but one, because I think that your life story is one that should be told. And so I think let's start there. Why don't you tell us, Allison, a little bit about your family?
Sure. Seth and I met in, Japan, as people do. We were a little bit older than than I ever expected to be to get married, but we met when we were about 27. Got married at 28, 29, and started trying to family plan. And that did not go as expected. So we got some challenging news that we weren't ever going to have kids the good old fashioned way. And so we started thinking about adoption. And at the time, it felt like this really beautiful gift because not everybody gets to build their family this way. And we wanted to kind of sail past our soft spots because in a small way, we knew a lot about infertility and miscarriage and the trials that come along with family planning. And so we really sank into this adoption story with a lot of gusto and celebration. And then 1 month into adoption paperwork, we found out we were pregnant. And then again, and then again, and then again. And I don't say that irreverently because it's such a gift. And it was a gift that we didn't expect after that bad news that we got at the doctor that day. So because we had initially settled on adoption, once we had a family, a beautiful family, the old-fashioned way, people would ask us often, do you think you'll still adopt? And the right answer to that question felt like it should be yes. But the truth was what initially seemed exciting now felt terrifying. And so that was something that we had to really pray about And one day I was on a run. The Lord always has my full attention while I'm running because I like try to pick houses to die in front of. I'm like, oh, that one has mums. Let's go there. And so I was on a run, and it was so sweetly revealed to me that I felt God telling me, Allison, you can't say, God, you can have this, and you can have this, and you can have this, but you can't have this. This is mine. And I realized that my family was something that I felt like was mine. And it was very tenderly, very gently revealed to me that everything's God's and he has this. And so once we started praying into, is adoption something that we're called to, the answer became so clear that it became scarier to disobey what we felt like was a calling instead of scarier to potentially change the dynamics of our family. And so we decided to adopt. And adoption is more complex. It seems easy, right? It's like you need a home and I have one. But adoption ethics became very important to us, and we realized it's actually quite complicated, and it's never under ideal circumstances. So there's a lot of grief and there's a lot of trauma involved. And so we started praying around potentially as we were kind of looking at pictures. I'll just kind of shorten this part, but there was something about Emmanuel's smile that felt like a Sullivan smile. And I don't know any other way to explain that because he is very much Chinese and very much has Down syndrome, and by all technical standards does not look anything like us. And yet there was something in his smile that felt so familiar to me. And so as we started praying through potentially adopting a child who had Down syndrome, it was just a whole world of possibilities started opening up. And that is how Emmanuel came into our family, and we could have missed it all. It is a marvel. He adds so much, and we're so grateful.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I had you on here, Allison, is because I think sometimes people welcome a child with Down syndrome into their families not knowing. You know, they go to the ultrasound and they find out that you guys willingly chose that.
Yes.
Was that a conscious choice, Allison, or was it just this kid is the perfect fit for our family?
So it's interesting because we never set out to necessarily adopt a kid who had special needs. And there was just something about him. And so as we started to pray through the complications of that, because I don't want to minimize the complications of adopting a child with special needs. There are medical expenses. There are health complications. Healthcare is a nightmare. You know, there are real things that we would be taking on. And like I said, it just became so clear that that's what was meant for our family. One of the things I thought a lot about our biological children in this. Is this something that they would eventually or potentially resent us for? You know, the attention that extra attention the child might receive, the doctor's visits and things that would make our life more complicated. Maybe embarrassment, you know, is that something that they might feel ashamed of, being in public or whatever? And as I was kind of gripped by this worry and this concern, I had a very wise friend tell me, Allison, if this is something that God has called you to, he has called your children to it as well. And so, yes, to answer your question, it was a very, very conscious choice.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, because I think it's not necessarily unique, but I think it does inspire us to maybe step outside of what we thought we might have planned for our life and be open to what, you know, the story that unfolds in front of us. And so I love that about y'all. Speaking of stories unfolding. So, okay, we'll come back to Manny in a minute, but I want to ask you this. So during the pandemic, most people are like baking bread or gardening, you know, finding new things to do. What was it that you guys did during the pandemic?
Not gardening.
Allison?
Plants commit suicide in my presence. I have zero green thumb. It's funny because I know it's like Gwyneth. I think she was like learning another language or something, and you know, people are writing their books, and we started making videos as a family to stay friendly with one another. It's like, how do we keep liking each other within these four walls? I know I will finally try to learn that TikTok dance that you've been bugging me about. Let's do it. So we started making TikTok videos as a family, having no idea that anyone would ever care to watch them. And then slowly, just things kind of started going viral one at a time. And the next thing we know, J-Lo's a follower. And so this TikTok channel has blown up. I mean, I don't want to say against our will because we're so grateful, but very, very, very much on accident.
Man, too bad Jenny on the block doesn't like roll around and just like show up at your doorstep and say,
I mean, feel like we shouldn't quite cross that off the list. I mean, it's funny though, because so when we saw that she was a follower, I'm freaking out. I'm like showing the kids.
I was freaking out for you.
Well, thank you, because I went straight to social media, which was pretty small and, intimate at the time, with my social media circles. And I'm like, y'all, what do I do? How do I make content if Jenny from the block is watching? Help a sister out. What do I do? She's not looking for dance tips. She's not looking for makeup tutorials.
Maybe don't dance for her. I think she's nailed that one. So.
I'm like, why is she here? Anyways, yeah, no, it's a great time. It's bonding. It's a fun little chapter in our lives. We realize that it could be gone in a blink. And so we're just having fun with it while it lasts.
So primary content, Allison, if someone, by the way, y'all are Sullivan family TikTok. Is that right?
Yeah.
Sullivan family? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what do y'all typically share?
Everything, it's just wholesome content through a family lens. We lean into some stereotypes. Things are pretty planned out for the most part. And I have my minor son on the internet. So that's just something I'm very thoughtful about and very mindful of. If it were bad for our relationship, we would have quit doing it yesterday. So everything is with his consent. He and I write together. We have a blast. And so it's really just, we lean into some stereotypes. Him as the angsty teen, me as the overbearing mom. And, I think it's pretty relatable. People are like, oh yeah, I've been there. Yeah, that's happened to me. Yeah. My teen says that too.
My kids found you on TikTok, my older ones. And they were showing me some videos and I was like, oh, I mean, that's Allison. And they're like, wait,
yeah.
You know her? And all of a sudden my street cred went way up. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome.
It was very good.
I can let you in behind the scenes. You can tell them, you can give them some inside scoop on how that was actually filmed.
I'm going to save that for a moment when I really need to win them over and I'll text you.
This is not your first rodeo. You're a veteran.
It is not. It is not. So Allison, when you're doing all of I know that you say that you don't necessarily shy away from talking about things or sharing things on TikTok. Were you, I guess, apprehensive about sharing? Because, sometimes the internet can be an unfriendly place. And so I know you know this. Yeah. So when you start sharing bits and pieces of your family, were you concerned at all that what people may or may not say about Manny?
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. It's interesting because it is usually, if anyone is mean, it is usually from a place of ignorance. And so there's a lot of education. And with a big platform like say TikTok, with an app that is used by a whole spectrum of people, the benefit of the doubt is easy I'm going to assume that I'm talking to a young person. I'm going to assume I'm talking to someone who doesn't know, and then kind education can be, I think, really nice and beneficial. And then it always ends in this pleasant, oh, thank you. I didn't know that. I mean, there are the occasional, just people who are, bent on being hateful that day. And, and that doesn't have anything to do with you as much as it has to do with them. But it's interesting because I think that there's a lot of things that are coexisting, because you can say there are actual statistics that people who have Down syndrome with 99% will answer the question, do you like yourself? 99% will say yes. 87% will say it's easy for me to make friends. Those statistics are markedly higher than people who do not have Down syndrome. And then you look at the family, and siblings will answer with beautiful statistics that it makes them a better person to have a sibling with Down syndrome. And so you have all of these statistics that prove that we don't think Down syndrome is a condition so dire that it would result in, say, an abortion. And yet, because of the non-invasive pregnancy diagnosis, NIPD, I don't know, anyways, but because of the test that with 99% accuracy can say this is a child who has Down syndrome, we know statistically that 67 to 85% of those pregnancies are end in abortion. And so there's a coexistence is what I'm trying to say. We have this camp that's like, oh, that seems sad and complicated and too hard. And then you have this other camp that is like, this is the best thing ever. These are the happiest people ever. I am a better person because of, and so ultimately we are living in a society where we get to decide who gets to be born and who doesn't. And I don't mean to make that sound any less complicated than it is, because there are medical things that follow these diagnoses. Healthcare is very challenging, and so it's a really, really interesting phenomenon to have both of these things coexisting together. So, do we see some ignorance and hatred? Yes, we do. Primarily, we experience so much love and joy and acceptance and celebration.
Well, I'm glad that you said maybe it's the disposition of the heart that matters, of how when someone says something does, and this is applicable for really anyone who has a child with special needs, regardless of what it may be, that sometimes people say something out of ignorance. And I think our default is to be like, why don't they see what we see? And of course they can't, because they don't live in our homes.
Right.
But when we can reposition the heart and reorient, our minds to say, let's look at this as an opportunity to educate someone. And I think it at least has been our experience with our son, is that sometimes when you tell people the why or your own experience, they are humbled enough to say, I had never thought of it that way, or that's a perspective that I had never considered before.
Right.
And I think that it teaches them to be more empathetic, and our response can help change the next interaction for them. And so it takes practice on both of our parts.
Yeah.
And I love that you see it, Allison, as an opportunity to educate instead of an opportunity to be like, why the heck don't you see how great it can be? Instead of always defaulting to the hard part. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support. Enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive.
There's also a measure of what is it that we value? What is like the success? And so if that is mathematical prowess, well, then of course you're going to view Emmanuel in a way that you see as less than. But if it's happiness, if it's peace, so I think that you can really kind of start to back up a little bit and say, well, what do we value? I love happiness and peace. Emmanuel is living life right. Our family is on the receiving end of that joy and that happiness and his peaceful spirit. So I think that there's sometimes an adjustment too. So an education and then a little bit of a backup and an adjustment.
Well, speaking of adjustments, what would you say, Allison, when it comes to living in a household and loving him and loving the rest of your children? What is the very best part of having a child with Down syndrome, and what is the most challenging part?
Yeah. I think the best part is watching my kids nurture. The feeling of nurture, it's like when nurture is done well, it's the best thing in the whole world, right? It's like, this is why we live life. We belong to each other. Like there's something about taking care of each other. And then to step back and watch your children do it. I'm about to give it's not a bad example. It's a funny example. But when you are an adoptive parent, people will come into your home and it's intended to be supportive. They want to know, is everything going okay? Do you need any extra support? But it feels judgy. It's a day that all the beds are made. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like you've cleaned the house and you've maybe coached the kids a little bit on, because they're going to interview you, biological children, about how and so this person had come to our house and they're interviewing our kids, and they're asking my oldest, who at the time was, it doesn't matter. He was maybe 10. Okay. And they ask him, if y'all were on the playground, if y'all were at the park and someone were making fun of Emmanuel, what would you do? She could not finish the sentence. And he looks at her and he goes, kick him in the nuts. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Okay.
We are not a violent family. And we have lots of words that they are encouraged to use all the time. I mean, but it was just this delightful moment of him. He was so caught off guard by the question, and he has such a good imagination and is so loving towards Manny that he was like, this is unacceptable. I would take care of that situation immediately. So that's the best thing for me, is just watching them nurture each other. I think the hardest thing is the adjustment. There's that word again, adjustment of steps. Again, I think of what we consider success. So because there is a component of parenting where you're like, these milestones met, celebrate, it's like you see your kids change and grow and evolve, and it's so exciting. And so those moments of change and growth are so much smaller. And so having the adjustment to separate or to celebrate smaller victories has been an adjustment.
Well, because we are a society, Allison, that often takes the, family and says, you are doing it well if your kids are meeting these milestones and achieving these things.
Yes.
And somehow you are failing your children if they don't. And, oh, I'm so sorry for you. That must be so sad, is our response. Instead of saying, I think every NICU mom listening can appreciate it's always the small milestones that feel so big. Like when your kid gets the IV out, or when, they finally say their first word and they might be 4 or 5, so, or older, or maybe even never, but maybe they can use the iPad. So it is a period of adjustment that you have to say, okay, so what I thought with my other children was this.
That's right.
And we are going to have to reorient for what is a success here. And not just reorient, but be grateful for the milestone, however small it may be, because it feels big, I think. And I think my perspective of how big milestones were completely readjusted when we had our son. So,
and we can be so focused on achievement, and ascending and doing and things that you can observe, and so much of the things that we're celebrating in our home are internal, are matters of the heart.
Yeah. I think you had a video. I can't remember if it was over on Instagram or if you put it over on TikTok, when Manny's running to the school bus and he is so excited.
Oh my gosh.
I can't tell you how many times our family has watched that video, because especially when we're having a bad day, because I was like, man, I wish that I ran into all my days the way Manny runs towards the bus.
Yes. I know that video ended up everywhere, and it's so delightful. So his bus drivers hung his moon, and literally for his 9th birthday, that's what we did. We took his bus drivers to Mexican food and celebrated with those 2 wonderful women, Miss Dana, Miss Pam. We love you so much. They start his every weekday off right. He loves the bus.
I love it. No, I think we have a lot to learn from our kids who are born with Down syndrome. I think that they open up a new part of our hearts maybe that we didn't know existed. So I'm grateful for that. All right. So I know that this month is Down Syndrome Awareness Month. Allison, if there is, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. If there's a mom that is willingly walking into a Down syndrome diagnosis, in other words, they're in your situation that they're adopting a child with Down syndrome, or if there's a mom who just got the diagnosis, she's the one giving birth to the baby and they found out Down syndrome, what would be the thing that you would want her to know about Down syndrome?
Yeah. There was this video and it went viral, and I have not been able to find it again, but it was it flipped the script. So someone finding out that they had a diagnosis and how you would expect them, oh, okay. Well, except the script was flipped where, oh, we're getting a kid that doesn't have Down syndrome. We're getting whether it's a neurotypical or a normal chromosome or whatever. And they're going through all these, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to, about having a kid without a diagnosis? And it was adorable. It was hilarious. So I just want to say that there are so many, I love that script flip because there are so many joys and so many delights and successes and belly laughs that are in store for you. The best is yet to come. You didn't ask for this, but if I had any advice to give, it would just be to surround yourself with people that are in similar circumstances, communities like this one, finding a group where you can say, you know what, I'm still changing diapers and it's hard. There are people, I felt so seen by you last month, Catherine, and just being able to say, this is something that I'm still doing. And it's not all joy and sunshine and smiles and rainbows. There are hard parts to this, but I'm met in that in my community. So this is where we can celebrate. This is where we can grieve. But I think that any time that we want to experience the high highs of joy, it is also experiencing those low lows. Anytime that we try to avoid this part, we're just going to lop off the top into joy too. So having a community to ride those low lows and high highs with you is just so crucial to experiencing it all, good and bad, happy and
I'm
sad.
so glad that you said our podcast and why we have all these interviews is never to sugarcoat or to be like, oh, but let's always look at the bright side, because there are real moments of hardness, real moments of you looking in the mirror thinking, I can't believe
bathroom
that
floor,
this is my
man.
life.
I mean, we reckon on the bathroom floor in the middle of the night.
It's hard, but I'm so grateful that you said that it's the community. I think of some of the NICU moms that I met and some of the NICU nurses and some of the people that I met because of my son that we would have never been introduced to before.
Right.
And how they not only have helped us help him achieve milestones, but they have helped me as his mom. And I have felt so much less alone than I would had I not, really said, this is a community that I love and I want to be a part of this. And I am no longer going to try to weather all this on my shoulders and try to be like super mom and try to do it myself. And so if there's anything that I want people to hear, it's that it's not going to be always easy, but it's always not going to be always hard. And there's people that are going to walk with you.
There's this, if I can say one more thing, there was this frame shift, a reframing that happened when we knew that we were going to have to adopt, or when we thought we were going to have to adopt a family plan. And I think that it's because it was my husband's body and not mine that I took on this role of cheerleader. And my role was, not everybody gets to build their family this way. This is going to be beautiful. This is awesome. It felt like an opportunity. And I think that there's something about that mindset of not everybody gets to do this. We get to do this. We've been chosen to do this. This is going to be beautiful. That I think adds opportunity to the mix instead of assignment. This is an opportunity to enrich your life, to thicken your life.
I was going to ask you more questions, but I think that's the perfect way to end it, because I think Allison, that we have great opportunities in the challenges that we're given, and man, it's life. It's the kind of life altering stuff that you say, okay, this is good. Not everybody else's family looks like this, but this is good.
Yeah. And change is on the other side of challenge. It's like, is it challenging? Yes. But we are going to grow into these people that we never even imagined that we'd get to be because of this experience and how our family is going to come together and rally, And it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. We could stay the same, I suppose.
Where's
we
the
didn't
fun
have any
in that though?
No. Yeah. And I think that the reason people try to resist change is because it's what's unknown that's on the horizon, but control and certainty are a myth anyway.
Well, and I think we look at change as if, like the Allison 10 years ago didn't see the Allison today, but you've also grown a lot since then. And so 10 years ago, you may have looked at that and said, there's no way I can do this. But you weren't accounting for the opportunity that you were going to give yourself to grow and change and how much more you were going to be able to give. And so sometimes I think we make decisions today based on what we could do or what we can do in 10 years, not accounting for the opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. Amen to that. That's why we're just given little pieces at a time.
Yeah. I agree. Oh my gosh, Allison, thank you so much for helping us realize the beauty and the challenge of having a child with special needs. But also, I love how you share it all on social media. And I'm so grateful to call you a friend.
I am really, really grateful that we're friends in real life, Catherine. If your community is ever wondering, I would like them to know that what you see is what you get with this woman who is just a marvel of nurture and compassion and depth. I'm so, so grateful for you.
You're the best, Allison. Thank you. I hope that you enjoyed every last bit of that conversation as much as I did. The thing that I love about Allison is that she always has such a great way of putting words to things that many of us experience and then shifting our hearts to see it in a new way. I've really loved when I asked her the question. So, okay, 2-minute take today. This is my 2-minute take. I really loved when I asked her the question of, were you worried about putting your family on social media, the imperfectly perfect parts of your family? And when she responded with, I see, at first I remember who was commenting. Sometimes people just say things and they are in a bad place and you sort of put them into one category, right? But the vast majority of people, I loved how she said it's an opportunity to educate them, thinking about where are they coming from. I'm going to gently walk into this conversation and I'm going to perhaps give them something that they haven't thought of before. And they're going to walk away with a greater understanding, more empathy, less judgment. And I think that's what this whole conversation about Down syndrome really has me excited to share with you, is that we have so many opportunities to educate, not just children with Down syndrome, but children of varying special needs, that we have an opportunity in our day-to-day life. Yes, in social media, but in our day-to-day life, to see it as an opportunity to educate someone. And I know that sometimes you were in a place to do that. And sometimes you were like, I just need to get my groceries and I just need to get home. But I think if we can reposition our hearts to be more open, I think that it can be such a beautiful thing for our children and our family members, and certainly for that person that's on the receiving end of that. And then, we talked about some other stuff. We talked about how we change, right? So making decisions based on how we feel today, I think we can't, and we emphasize this in the interview, but give yourself the grace to change, y'all. You are not going to be the same mom when you walk out of the NICU that you will be in 10 years. You are going, I am proof. 14 years later, thank goodness, I am not the same mom as when I walked in the NICU doors. And that's all because of our kid. It's all because of the thing that I feared. And here we are. And there have been some really hard days. And Allison and I talked about that. There were some really hard days, like on the bathroom floor. I can't do this anymore. This is really hard. And then that is when we circle ourselves with community. That is what Hand to Hold is all about, is circling yourself with community that sees you, that understands you, that can be there on the good days and the hard days, but that allows you to get to the next day, and not just get to the next day, but to get there with joy and with some fortitude and like, okay, we can do this. So I was so happy that Allison said so many of those things. So don't be afraid to be you on social media. Don't be afraid to share the good and the hard, particularly when it comes to sharing our lives with our children. And some of them have special needs and some of them are just cantankerous. But I think that the world needs to see that family life can be really beautiful, really challenging. And this opportunity, I think, to allow ourselves to grow can be such a gift, not only to ourselves, but to the people in which we encounter. And with that, we'll chat next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.